So our waiting room has died down, so I will go ahead and get started. So hello everyone, and welcome to the first session of Illini Aero Connections. This new speaker series was started as a way to connect our alums and our students at a time when we're not able to do that physically. So we had hoped to cover some topics that maybe go beyond the classroom lesson and give you some insight into some topics that you are hopefully interested in. So Samantha McCue is with us. She is a 2013 alum and has been one of the partners in creating this seminar series for you. And I am just going to go ahead and turn it over to her to get started.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Courtney. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So thank you everyone for joining us. We're really excited to get this program started. We're hoping that we've got some exciting and relevant topics for all of you. And today I'm really excited to kick it off with this entrepreneurship session. Just a real quick 30 seconds. Like she said, I graduated in 2013. I work currently as a flight test director and integration and test lead for a small company based out of Austin, but I travel all over the country, which is why I'm in my car right now. I'm in California working on some ground testing. And in my free time, quote unquote, I also own and manage 2 small fitness businesses. So this session is uniquely interesting to me because I also do some small business work, but it's not in aerospace. However, today we're going to hear from 2 people that have done business work in aerospace. And I'm going to let them just go ahead and kick it off. So Jenny, can you give us a quick little bio and background about yourself?
Oh, here, let me take myself off mute first. Classic Zoom mistake. Okay, so my name is Jenny Collins. I graduated from U of I the same year as Samantha. After that, I was a strategy consultant in Washington, D.C. for the aerospace and defense industry. I decided to go back to grad school, so I went to MIT and got a master's of aerospace and an MBA. And while I was there, I met my two co-founders, and I did a startup in the satellite electronics space for 2 years. And now I'm no longer working at the startup, and I'm with Raytheon Intelligence and Space.
Cool, thank you. And then we also have Mike on the line. Mike, can you give us a little intro about yourself?
Sure, Mike Miller, got a BS degree in aero and also electrical in 1976. Had a lot of jobs. In fact, some people would say I couldn't hold a job. Started out very early on doing control system design and analysis on the Delta rocket. Went into satellite design and management of communication satellites, and then became an entrepreneur back in the early 80s. While I was going to business school to get my MBA. My company, Hughes Aircraft, helped me out with that. And while there, I met up with a couple of folks and we started Orbital Sciences Corporation. The rest was sort of history. I'd wound up over the years doing 3 startup ventures, all in technology, then became a venture capitalist and private equity executive and funding new entrepreneurial ideas. And today I have a consulting firm that looks at aerospace IT and information technology, develop new companies and do seed stage investment.
Awesome, thank you. So we're gonna kick it off right out of the gates. I'm gonna start with Jenny and we'll have both of you answer this question. But the first one is, you graduated from engineering school, and then what? How did you get into business? How did it start? What was the initial idea or catalyst that made getting into business or becoming an entrepreneur a reality?
So I had always kind of worked at the cusp of business and engineering. When I was at U of I was also in the HEFT Technology and Management program, which is a program with the business school that supplies a business minor. So I always knew I liked the business side. And when I was a consultant in DC, one of the projects that we had worked on was about open systems architectures, and we had this months and months long project with a client where we advised them to invest in this technology and this system. So when I got to grad school and I found some folks in the aerospace department who are working on that same tech that I had consulted about, I thought, oh man, I know this from the business perspective. I already know the case for using this type of tech. And so that was the idea. And I think that, I don't know, Mike's had many opportunities, but I feel like there's not always a lot of opportunities in your life where you feel like you have this great idea. And when you're in school, you're in this really unique position where you have a lot of support structures that you don't necessarily have when you're in like the real world to start it. So while I was in grad school, you know, MIT has a lot of infrastructure to support new ventures. So my co-founders and I said, hey, let's see if we can make this work and get some traction while we're still in grad school. And then if things go well and we get good feedback, then we can get enough funding so we can survive once we're outside of the school environment, academic environment. So that's what we did. We won some entrepreneurial competitions at MIT, and then we got our first contract while we were still in grad school and set ourselves up. So when I graduated, we entered a Techstars accelerator, which was something that worked well for us. So it was kind of just the culmination of seizing the opportunity, kind of testing the water before I jumped in the real world without a salary to start it, and then tried to get some traction before jumping in head first.
Awesome. I think that's a really good point, right? Like you don't always get those opportunities. So when you see them, you kind of have to jump on it, right? If you want to go that route. That's a cool perspective.
Yeah, you have to consult your husband or your family and tell them, hey, I think I want to do this. And then get their nod of approval, and then jump in.
Right. And then Mike, I think you probably have a similar story. So can you share with us how that all started for you?
Sure. Well, I was doing traditional, engineering work. I was at a company, Hughes Aircraft, in their space and communications group. Fairly young, they made me a project engineer in the development of a communications satellite. And through that, I began to learn a little bit about the business aspects of satellite communications. I remember the company saying, your power system is too heavy. Well, we're paying $10,000 in development to drop 1 pound of weight off a satellite. Then we learned that the satellite was late being launched. Their customer was going to charge them, $50,000 a week for a late launch. That sort of got me interested in the business aspect of it. As it turned out, there was an opportunity for me to go to business school, and I decided, rather than taking five years to do it, went off and went to the University of Chicago to start to get my MBA. So while there, I was just following the news, what was going on in the space shuttle. It just started to be launching. It was becoming the age of commercialization. I met up with a couple of people. We started talking about where this might lead and what the future might lead. Had a couple of ideas. I had worked on an upper stage project while I was at Hughes that we were going to develop our own business. And as I talked to, it turned out David Thompson, who became the original founder of Orbital, with his idea. We sat, we worked together, and here I was at school, had a young daughter, and he said, I had jobs available to me as soon as I graduated, go back to my old company. People wanted me to work, but this was something that was really compelling. It was to start something new. It was innovative. It was in the space realm, which I was really interested in. And at the end of the day, I said, this is really not a risk. If you're confident in what you know and what you can do, worst that can happen, it would fail. You get a regular job maybe after that. But if you could raise some money and convince some folks that you can pull this off, you go for it. So that's what we did. In fact, there were 5 of us that moved to the Washington area, opened up a little office. There was literally $15,000 in the bank, and we committed to try to make it happen. And I think that's kind of a message I want to give to to the entrepreneurs. Why I did it was an opportunity, confident in myself and my education to be able to do something if it didn't work out, and was at the age when you could we can devote a lot of time and energy, especially time, to something like this.
And Mike, I don't know if you can speak to more details on this, but I know something I've been kind of mentored on in the business realm is like lots of businesses fail, right? I mean, that's actually
Right.
more fail than thrive. So I think as a young entrepreneur, that's the fear, right? Is that you're going to fail. I think almost, I don't want to say normalizing, but sort of being willing to take the jump and knowing that if you fail, you're still a technical person. You can still, like you said, go get a job or go do something else, entrepreneurial if you want to. I think that's a scary step when you're 22 and you're,
Right, right. Yeah, I had three entrepreneurial ventures, and each one in between, I actually had a regular job until you can, get the energy. And I have had ventures that I've been involved with and ran and tried to be an entrepreneur that just outright failed, for reasons. I did a biotechnology deal, and it's like, I look back, it's like, gee, missed the market by about a year. If I would have been a year later, it would have been great, but too early. But overall, if you have confidence in yourself and in your and what technologically, there's no problem in applying your skills elsewhere if an entrepreneurial venture you're in doesn't work out.
Right. So I think a good segue then is to talk about money, because when you're 22 or 21 or 23, whatever it is, when you come out of school, you're not always, the bank account doesn't always look like you want it to start a new business. So I guess Jenny and Mike, can you guys each speak to, how did you either win money, acquire money, borrow money, beg your parents? What did that look like to start your first venture or future ones, if those are more, I guess, important to kind of highlight some things you want to talk about? Jenny, could you maybe talk to that first?
Sure. I'd say that, first of all, starting a company is easier if you have money, just period. Like if you have some cushion, if you've saved up for a few years and you have a little bit in the bank to help yourself, then it is easier. I think there's a reason why a lot of, it's easier to raise capital when you're wealthy, and it's easier to start businesses when you're wealthy. It's just a fact that's unfair, but I think it's absolutely true even today. But I think what can help a lot is if you're trying to start a company, you're thinking about it, especially while you're in school, is trying to get those income sources while you're still in school and not necessarily responsible for full-time employment to pull money in. So, for example, while I was in grad school, we had talked with customers and gotten a contract for a couple $100,000, and that was a helpful source of revenue. I also wanted to plug the SBIR program, the Small Business Innovation Research Program. That's wonderful if you're trying to start up a technical business. They're run by the federal government, and they're run like grants, and you can apply, and there's different SBIRs for many different branches of the federal government. The one that we used was with the Air Force, and they have a new rapid contracting contract called AFWorks. It's the easiest way to get 50 grand in your life, I imagine. So I highly recommend the AFWorks program. And I think SBIRs are also a great segue if you're trying to do a venture that leverages research from your university. I think that tends to be a win-win-win situation for everyone. It's a win for you because someone's developing this really cool IP. It's a win for your university because they get to say that the research that they're doing is contributing to the greater economy. And it's a win for the government too, because a lot of these university research is sponsored by the government, and the government wants to spur innovation in the economy through these small businesses. So I highly recommend looking into SBIRs, especially if you're leveraging some really high technology products that come out of academic research. But those are all good sources. We also did get some venture capital. I don't recommend raising VC in the time of COVID. Mike, you can probably speak to that. It's not impossible, but it certainly makes it extra difficult. But I think that there are certainly lots of streams of revenue out there. The best kind of money you can get is customer money. And then grant money is great because there's no equity involved, and venture capital money is good too, but there's always going to be strings attached. And with that, I'll pass it off to Mike to talk about his strings that comes with his VC money and other things.
Right. Well, I can talk about all the different ways my ventures were funded. And like I said, there's just no one way to do it. Sometimes you can bootstrap it. look for in the ventures I was involved with. Orbital was one wealthy Texan that was willing to, put some walking around money to develop a business plan and prove out some points to add value. And that morphed into eventually a venture capital investment, which moved into a big partnership that was floated on Wall Street. Back then it was a tax advantaged activity that raised $50 million to actually build a rocket stage. Who would have thought you could raise something like that in a couple of years. But I've also was involved in a venture with taking a technology out of a university with grad students. Back it was two professors, and I came upon them, and they had already decided themselves in their own little company to take second mortgages on their homes, and had run out of money. That I would advise, don't do that. Don't max out your bank credit cards right away. Don't have a series of dollars you have to pay back regularly if you don't have any revenue back. But it really depends on the type of ventures. As Jenny said, there's all sorts of ways to take new technologies and get some funding for it, to incubate it and develop it. There are a lot of centers and places to help. But nothing beats finding a few people we call angel investors that are like your idea, that are willing to give you some of that seed money, some of that early money to kind of mature your idea, and maybe mature a few pockets of your technology that needs to be worked on to actually perform a product, and use that as leverage then to go to the next step.
Perfect. So Mike, I know you've done a lot on the VC side of things, both sides of the table, I guess. If I were going to walk into a room with a VC, I guess let's talk COVID and non-COVID world. Maybe we can do that. Maybe, I don't know. But let's talk pre-COVID. What would your advice be to people that are going and presenting to VCs and hoping to get VC money as a big chunk of what they're going to use for the start of a company or the continuation and growth of a company?
Well, I guess the first thing I would do is to, it's hard to get money from a VC. Remember that it's not that you might have a bad idea or a bad plan, but as a VC, we'll look at hundreds of plans or dozens of plans, and because you're not the one or two that moves on to the next round, it's a process. So the first recommendation is make sure you try to understand as much as you can about VC or the investor before you go to them, rather than thinking that anybody who's got money is someone you should go after. You should get to understand them. What are their other investments? Maybe even call some other ones, because they all put on their websites their portfolio of the companies they've invested in. See if there'd be a right fit. Then when you get to that, really, your business plan, they're going to look at your business plan. It doesn't have to be a super duper one, but right up front, and as a VC, if you couldn't lock me down in the first, 3 or 4 pages, I'm on to looking at the next one. So you really have got to think about the main points and why you're compelling. It's sort of the elevator pitch in writing. And if you can get a verbal in talking to someone at a meeting or a conference or some event or a pitch plan, you've got to have that 12-second elevator pitch. You've got to have something that will grab their attention and want to hear more. So that's what I would advise, right up front. Now you've got to have, a value proposition. You can't have your head in the stars. You can have a product that maybe will go to the stars, but nothing with your head in the stars. You can't say, look, in 2 years, we're going to be $1 billion company, and, just give us the money and leave us alone. And that just doesn't work anymore. You have to understand what the market it is, what the potential revenue is. You've got to be able to tell them how you're going to build up your company in a reasonable way, how much money you really need to get it done. And think about the hundreds of questions that need to be answered for all aspects of the business before you go and try to pitch your plan.
So Mike, I'm curious, you've looked at pitches before, I'm sure written and in person, all these kinds of things. What helped you differentiate? If you've got 100 companies you're looking at, you personally, how did you pick the stuff you liked or that you were interested in that you wanted to pursue or give money to?
Well, I'm looking for, one of value proposition. Someone wants to tell me that, something costs now, X, and you can do the same thing for 1/10, right? At the same price, and you can sell customers. That's going to be, very interesting. The other thing is someone who really has a handle on a market. I'll just use an orbital example. People would say, well, you're not going to sell a lot of these things. And I use this statement all the time. And I say, well, you don't count swimmers in the water to figure out who's going to build and use the bridge when you build it. And it's sort of like that. You've got to tell a story. Another business I said, look at, if you use our technology, instead of 5 runs a day of your service, you can do 6 and you can make X amount of dollars. I'm looking for that from an entrepreneur. I'm looking for someone that understands that there's value in what they're trying to develop or what they're trying to do. The product doesn't even have to be there yet. They have to show that the technology is achievable, it's potential if you put enough money in it. It's differentiated from what's out there on the market. And they thought through a little bit of what it's going to take to get there. So that's what's compelling to me. Now, if it's an aerospace project, I'm always interested. I can't tell you in my career how many launch vehicle business plans I've had, how many satellite ventures that I've seen. I even today, I don't see one that's all that different. You say the same thing, if I can get the cost down to $5,000 per pound or 1,000 or 1 million, right? The satellites are just going to come flying to my, to my company. And there's still 100 folks out there that want to build, a launch vehicle. I don't toss them. Every once in a while, there's one where I said, there's a new thing here. I know it's going to take a lot of capital, but it's something that I might want to invest in. I hope that helped.
It did. Yeah, I imagine getting inundated with so much it starts to look the same. So I was curious what things you pick out that, maybe makes that different.
Yeah, it's really a feel. I just want to give one other anecdote. Before GPS, was a thing, and everybody's got GPS in their phones right now. There are a lot of companies that said, look we can put a device here, there, or elsewhere in your car. We can find where things are. If you had a fleet of 100 trucks, we can show you on the map where all your trucks were. And I saw dozens of those ventures until someone came to me and said, hey, you know what? It's not about that. We can put all the GPS devices on things, but we know this company has a lot of stolen goods, and they don't want to know where their tractors or their trucks are every 5 minutes. They just want to know if it's in this particular area and not where it's supposed to be. And they'll pay $100 for that piece of information. They don't want to pay $99.95 a month, right, to know where everything is. So that's the difference is, you kind of have to understand the market, but if you see something interesting, you want to plow down and say, hey, this could be an interesting business.
Awesome. Thank you. I think one follow-up question too, Jenny, for you that's interesting to me is there are a lot of people at Illinois and all of the major universities, right, that might invent something or come up with an idea or be a part of an idea that's developing in either undergrad or grad school. And they have this cool tech, but it's really not clear how you take that out of a university or with the university and make it into a company and where is that separation, right, of what's the universities and what is the people's and what's the companies and how does that work? You obviously kind of lived that a little bit at MIT. I'm sure Mike can talk to other places, but can you talk to us about what that kind of tech transfer path looked like from being a student to being able to say, yeah, this is my company with this tech?
Yeah, and I think Mike brought up something that's relevant to this too, is that a very small piece of your business is about the technology, especially when you're pitching. It's not just oh, I have this, sexy new tech that allows me to track cars. It's how does that solve a problem? And like Mike said, oh, this company will pay me $100 to make sure that their goods don't get stolen. And I think that's something that can be difficult with university research, as people are so enamored with the technology and the work that goes into it is amazing. But it solves this very specific technical problem, but that might not translate into real financial savings for people, which is what you need for the business. I think one thing that tends to be tough with aerospace and research going on in the universities too is it solves a very, very specific problem. And like Mike said, market size matters. If you have this great, amazing solution that's gonna, maximum have a value of or has the biggest market possible of $100 million, that's not a venture scalable business. You need $100 million in revenue to be a venture scalable business. So I think that you need to be realistic with yourself and with the economy of, how much money could I possibly bring in? What is the problem that I'm solving with this technology? Who is it applicable to? Are there adjacent markets that I can find that's not just aerospace? So I think you have to do some soul searching and kind of take yourself back from the tech and think about how this can bring economic value and how much value can you realistically obtain from that technology. And there's nothing wrong with having a small business and not doing venture capital and getting some money and having like a $10 million a year company or a $1 million a year company with one person. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. It's not a venture backable company, but you can absolutely have a small business that is just you and a couple of people, and you can live a great life that way and have a great lifestyle. And that's also equally cool to have that sort of business as not venture backable, but you can absolutely pursue those smaller businesses, bootstrapping or, getting these government contracts. There's many SBIR small businesses. So just to say that there's a very specific set of criteria to take a technology and make it a venture backable company. And there's another similar set of criteria to make something a business, but it doesn't necessarily have to have that same scalability that venture-backed companies require.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jenny, I've seen a lot of those businesses that they're not VC backed. They're lifestyle businesses, especially here in the Washington area. A lot of government contractors, a lot of smart technology people doing SBIRs and new technology, but not necessarily willing to take the outsized risk to raise money and sort of what I will call betting the company to go to the next level. Not everybody has to do that, because you can make a good life just looking at the technologies you have or having a small product and not leveraging it. I want to quickly talk about my second venture, which was a university spin-out. One of my in-between jobs, I was at the Center for Innovative Technology in Virginia, was running that. It was working with Virginia universities, had their patent portfolios to market, which was really interesting, try to commercialize patents that professors came up with. Happened to meet a couple of professors who had a grad student who actually had patented a way to do 3D position measurement. And it happened to be an electrical engineering professor and a civil engineering professor. And they just had developed a device to do surveying. And I looked at it and said, "Oh my God, it weighed 100 pounds. It was ridiculous, but I thought it could be used in a lot of different areas." And we spun that out of the basically university environment with the grad student when he graduated. It was his master's thesis. Created the company, added my own money into it. Became the CEO of it. We raised millions of dollars. That technology today, the civil engineering part of it is owned by Nikon, but the indoor part of it is called indoor GPS, and now most of the Boeing airplanes are assembled using that technology. It took millions of dollars to do over the years of new development, but it was a core technology that, as things got miniaturized and new technology development occurred, allowed it to move into different areas. I say this because money was hard to come by for this particular venture. And we formed a consortium. It was one thing that that Jenny didn't mention. There were a couple of SBIRs, but we actually pulled some of the big folks like Bechtel and Fluor and the Army Corps of Engineers, and we said, hey, we're going to create a consortium that can, you know, revolutionize position measurement and use their money almost as a donation to get the product developed back many years ago.
That's really cool. And setting that up, was that you guys reaching out to them and bringing them together to say, hey, look, we're solving this problem for everyone, and that's how they became willing to do it?
Exactly. And then it was like, okay, so now you had a stake in it, helped us along. And when the first product came out, they became our, you know, our beta customers and the ones that would eventually, you know, buy it.
Right. That's great. That's awesome. So I guess we're going to pivot just a little bit. I'm curious. I know that in engineering, especially in school, right, things tend to be fairly black and white. Maybe the students on the phone may disagree a little bit, but you know, math, science, there's usually a right answer and a wrong answer somewhere in there. But business is definitely not the same. I know in my personal experience, my hardest days have nothing to do with the product or service that I sell. It has everything to do with the people and the things you can't control. COVID is a great example of some things that have made my life difficult. But I'm interested for you guys in a tech aerospace companies that you've run and been a part of. What was maybe the hardest decision you had to make from a business perspective, or something that was really, really just so hard? And did you make the right or wrong decision? Were you ever able to know if you made the right or wrong decision? Jenny, I'll kick it to you first.
Sure. So I decided to leave my startup, which was a very, very hard decision. You really put I'm sure both Mike and Samantha can attest, you really put your blood, sweat, and tears into the company that you build. And you spend so much of your time trying to, you know, build it up and get a strong foundation for your company. And I think what was important for me is I think when you start a small business, a lot of people tell you to, you know, like set up metrics, set up goal milestones and dates that you want to reach them, to really help show that you're moving forward as a business, and to also show your team members that you have momentum, because morale is a big thing when you're a small business owner. And I had set up some goals and metrics for myself and for the company. And then when you miss it the first time, you're like, okay, like I got to be concerned about this. And when you miss it the second time, you're like, okay, what's going on? And then when you realize that it's not sustainable for your life, or you're unhappy and you don't really see a way out of it, then I think that was my time for when, you know, I decided to leave. We had some co-founder issues are always one of big reasons why startups tend to have difficulties, and it is a hard dynamic. Everyone's putting their heart and soul into something and has a very strong vision for what they want. So I made the decision to leave my startup. I was very, very conflicted about it for a long time, but now I'm working a like quote unquote regular job, and I feel much happier about it. And I think part of it is you do have to weigh your personal happiness highly. I think you hear a lot of narratives about it's just, oh, I like ate soup for 10 years before I made like $1 million, and now I live in a palace. And you think if you just put your nose to the grindstone long enough, maybe it will happen. But you have to take into account your personal happiness and personal goals for what you want. So I think I ended up making the right decision. There's no way I'll ever know, but I think it was, you know, it was right for me. And, you know, business is just one part of your life. Your whole life doesn't have to be your company. And I think it can be really all consuming sometimes. So, you know, you're what matters, not necessarily, you know, this company. I think it's different. Mike can speak to when you have employees, and then Samantha too, and then the stakes get much, much higher. So, but for me, it was just me and my co-founders and 3 people, and I made the decision, and I'm happier for it today, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many inflection points that I've seen. You know, like Jenny, early on, I left Orbital after a few years. It was clear to me that you were going to have to bring in some seasoned people. I was, all of 32. So, the question was, who was going to lead the company going forward? Was I going to spend 20 years to try to get to a point that I can bring in some people that, or the company could bring in some people? There's always co-founder issues. So it's like, did I get what I wanted out of that particular venture and starting it up? And I could always put it on my resume and say, here's what happened, sold many years later for 10 billion. But I think the hardest stuff is dealing with this decision of whether you want to keep people that you've brought in. I've had as a VC, I've had to shut down companies. It's like, whether you put more money in, is it going to get there, or do you have to tell 200 people that are getting paid from this venture, sorry, we got to shut you down. There's not going to be more money, and that's the end. And that's the end of that. It's not going to work. And then personally, the decision of whether you've made the right decision or I've made the right decision in hiring certain people. You have to build out a management team. You can't do everything yourself all the time. It'll just totally burn you out. Early on, you want some flexibility with people. You work ungodly hours, but then you want to, build a team and have them do it rather than you being in absolute control. And it's a tough decision to try to decide whether or not, after you bring someone in and you've courted them and they've changed their life to be part of your venture, and say, sorry, it didn't work out. You're not going to the next level. And then the third is, when you're really almost out of money yourself, what do you do? One of my second venture, we just had a tough time raising capital. We were running out of money. We had a term sheet. We had a deal, and the VC kept on slow rolling us to try to close. And eventually, I had to say, look, I'm going to cut my pay to zero if all you employees and volunteer to take some cuts for the next 6 weeks. I think we can get through this, and I'll give you a little extra after we get the money. And the question at that point was really, do we lay people off right then, or do we keep it together and see if we could get some folks to buy in? So there's hundreds of little decisions like that you don't know until after the fact whether or not they were the right decision or not.
Right. Yeah. One of the pieces of advice that I was told, and I always, I don't know if I like this advice, but I find it true, is in business, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I always find the decisions are hard to make when I'm dying, right? So if my business isn't growing in some way, and you can measure that in
Right.
personnel and revenue and product, and there's a million ways to measure growth. But if those things aren't growing, typically you're making a hard decision, whether that's, how do I cut out expenses? What does that mean for my people? What am I doing? I can't always take the same aggressive steps I want to. And that's true in, a boutique yoga studio, the same as that's true in a multi-million-dollar aerospace company, I think.
Right.
It's a little sad when you say it, but it kind of is true.
Well, I just want to add a point that having engineering degrees and having an engineering mindset, to me, really helps in business too. You can have an analytical framework on things where you can say, okay, if I do this, here's what's going to happen. Let me sort of test the business aspects of decisions, using some of the skills that are developed during your engineering work. That's really helpful in a business context, rather than trying to wing it or pull it out of your pocket or make a decision because you just feel like it. So that grounding, I think, does come into play a lot in the business world.
Yeah, Jenny, I'm curious, from your perspective, you went to Illinois and did go on to grad school, but what do you think from Illinois most helped you, I guess, transition into the business world or consider an entrepreneurial venture? What did you take away from that time at Aerospace that really helped you?
I'd say this is true in business. It's true in engineering. It's all about the people you meet. become friends with all your classmates. Be in touch with the people who are not in your class. You never know who you're going to run into and who is going to be helpful. And those connections, I think you form a lot of bonds that are strong in college and school because you're together going through a common experience. And you can do that with other entrepreneurs too, but a lot of this is a game of who you know. And so take the opportunity to get to know your classmates. I know it's harder on Zoom probably, but do well in your classes. Don't worry if you don't do the best. Just still do well, succeed, and form real relationships and connections while you're there, because they'll be helpful as you grow in your professional career.
Mike, what about you? I know you said that that foundation is there. Is there anything else specific you'd like to touch on with that?
Well, I think that if, while you're, getting your engineering degrees and in school, you just don't want to focus 100% on academics. You want to be able to, I think, not only what Jenny said, network, get to know people, but work on projects and work on things outside the academic environment that can maybe develop some additional skills. They could be speaking skills. They could be writing, additional writing skills. They could be trying to get some sort of project or activity where you have to meet a deadline or in a milestone, outside, the academic and learning environment. I think those are all things to sort of develop yourself, right? Along with your academic and engineering and technical knowledge that always come into play in business. Plus, when you can do some of that, you get a lot of confidence. And I have to tell you that, it's almost like a smell test for me when I see entrepreneurs and young people. You could almost pretty quickly, okay, even on a Zoom, get the feeling of whether they, got it. Just in the 10 minutes listening to Jenny, I can tell, she's got that entrepreneurial vibe, would be, someone that you'd want to listen to more and invest in. You can just tell. It's the enthusiasm, it's the knowledge, it's the surety, it's being able to articulate what your thoughts and what you want to do. If you can develop those skills while in school, that will help you for the rest of your career.
Yeah, I completely agree. I often joke that I'm selling the aura of my personality and my staff more than I'm selling anything else, right? It has nothing to do what we do in the gym, for example. All that matters is that we say hello, we care about them, we invest in the customers, and they invest in us. I think that's true in every business, right? It's people. They're investing in people, and the tech is there, and it's got to work. But that confidence comes from the people that are in the room and shaking hands and presenting about it. So I definitely want to leave time for questions. I know we got about 15 minutes left. So Courtney, I'm not sure how you want to open up the questions, but I'd like to pause here and do that if we can.
Yeah, everyone just feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions of Mike, Jenny, or Samantha. We don't want to hold anybody back. So go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
So I'm going to start. Philip here. Yeah, it's not really that I'm considering this kind of adventure, but the question that often comes when someone wants to start a business is that something that you do on the side in addition to I want to call it a real job, but a more permanent job, or is it something that you want to dive into and spend all your time on?
I can answer that. I mean, I've seen a number of people come and pitch me, and even myself, and my best advice to them is don't quit your day job. It's not going to work. But I know for my own career, I'd like to say I'd have three half-time jobs, and one of those would be, an entrepreneurial venture while I'm also getting income from what I'm doing. Some people just, go right off the end of the diving board and quit everything and devote 100%, to their business idea. You've got to be awfully sure that you're going to have the money and the ability to, sustain yourself for quite a while if you do that. So, working nights and weekends with your team, staying up late at night, building your business plan, showing it to people on the side, taking an hour here, or hour there, to sort of incubate your business and idea and see if it's got some legs before you just jump full throttle into it is something that I would recommend. But every case is different.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike and say just look at your financial situation, and that will tell you how long can you be unemployed with no income for and be okay. That is certainly one big factor. And also looking at your technology stage, like if aerospace obviously often takes a really long maturation period to go, and you have testing that you have to plan out for. If you're going to get radiation testing before you're able to bring it to market, and the first radiation test you can schedule with a major lab is in a year, then that's how long it's going to take. Maybe you don't want to quit your job until you have that testing, that market tested proof that your product works. So I would agree with Mike and say also just look at your personal financial situation and the stage and how fast it's going to take your technology to mature.
Yeah, it's funny. I get asked the question almost daily now. Are you going to keep doing both? Are you going to keep running the businesses and do your day job? And my answer is always, I love both of them. And as long as I love both of them, I'm going to do both of them. There comes a day where I don't like one of them, then I'm going to stop. So, yeah, I think I'm lucky to be in that position. I feel lucky to be in that position, but I think you have to evaluate that too. If doing one becomes a chore and it's really a job and you don't like it anymore, then it's time for it to go. If you can afford it, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at to invest in someone too, I don't mind that they're working on the side, because I don't want them to come across as saying, look, at what I'm really trying to do here is get a new salary, right? I want to see them investing in themselves, putting some risk, what we call skin in the game, to to take some of that risk. I don't want them to put it all on me, right? But at the same time, I also realize that someone's got to, earn a living and just focus on their business if it's going to be done. So you want to watch that point at a very early seed stage. No problem with someone having another job if they can, move the ball to the next stage in order to get more funding and develop their technology. But at a certain point, right, you can't do both. You've got to decide, what you're going to do. If you really want to take the risk, or you want to invest in this idea and you really believe in it, and you can get some money, then you have to put the past behind you or your current job and be willing to do that. But you don't want to do it, willy-nilly just because you think it's a cool thing to do at the moment.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a sophomore in aerospace engineering, and I just wanted to say thank you guys for taking time out of your day to come talk to all of us. But I was just wondering, how difficult or easy was it for you guys to kind of transition into from more of an engineering STEM field into more of the business side? How hard was it or easy to make that decision?
I'll talk just because I kind of always straddled business and engineering, so it wasn't so bad for me. I think that some people, where I've seen some engineers struggle, especially when making the transition to business, is an inability to connect with people. You gotta be a relationship builder. And that's absolutely a skill. Some people think you're born with it, but it's absolutely a skill that you can work on. You have to be comfortable going up to people and saying hi that you don't know. And that's like such a huge part of business. You can have this, maybe in the most rare instances of technology where you have a tech that improves something 1,000-fold and you're going to save everyone $1 billion. All you need is those cold hard numbers and that great technology. But most of the time you need to be compelling, you need to be persuasive, and you need to build on those relationships. So I've seen a lot of engineers struggle with that and just think that everyone will understand how great their tech is, and they have trouble explaining it at a lower level. A very small percentage of people you encounter are going to actually genuinely understand what your technology does. So you need to be able to, explain it to a 5th grader. You need it like 2 sentences for people to understand what you're doing. So that's where I've personally seen engineers struggle, is in really putting an importance and putting time into becoming a better relationship builder and into working on their narrative and their explanations to make their technology really easily understandable to people. And those are both skills that you can absolutely work on if you are interested in making that transition over to business.
Yeah, I would agree. There are courses that can be taken. There is a lot of things online you can go to. You don't need an MBA to be an entrepreneur. I happen to go the MBA route, but I can assure you there was absolutely nothing that I recall specific to being an entrepreneur in my I learned in my MBA program. I learned this was at the time. I learned economics, and I learned finance, and I learned about accounting, and I learned about different functional things, but in operations. So that's all well and good from a management point of view, but it wasn't entrepreneurship. So I 100% agree with Jenny, but I would also say, don't be scared. I will tell you that there's not a lot of math in the other functions like there is in engineering. I think when I learned, finance, you can do, net present value, a future discount, that's not terribly complex. It's not a differential equation. It's a little calculator can do that type of stuff. So there are things you can learn about in terms of the functionalities of the business that can be picked up. The entrepreneurial skill, the intangibles, is something that just needs to be worked on day in and day out to feel comfortable in different environments than you would be in an academic or in an engineering design and analysis, right, environment. Does that answer your question, Emily?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I have a quick question for Mike, if it's okay, I can ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. So as you told us, Mike, you had a lot of experience investing in a lot of early stage companies, and as we've seen during COVID, a lot of great businesses have been struggling for liquidity. Banks aren't providing this liquidity because of the risk that's there, and a lot of companies that are direct lenders are able to take advantage of that situation and provide a liquidity, and being able to, and if the business model is good and the company invests, they can make a lot of returns. Have you been looking into some specific industry that you think might be beneficial for you to invest in right now, or did you take more of a backseat during this situation?
No, I mean, I'm not as active as I used to be, but I'm really enamored with what's being called new space right now, and the small satellite market. I'm not a big proponent of the large 12,000 satellite constellations and the things that Starlink is doing. I think it's really cool technology, but way back I was involved in some of the early constellations, and here's the thing: you can get enamored, say this is cool, putting up hundreds of satellites, and that is like really, really cool and neat. But who's paying for the services yet? What's it going to take to pull all that infrastructure together? On the other hand, I think there's some huge opportunities in components for small satellites and unique things in propulsion technologies. I'm pretty enamored with. I'm really interested in taking what would be commercial off-the-shelf devices that are sitting in laptops, PCs, smartphones, and putting that into the space environment to perform services. Not big on launch vehicles. So as a space guy, I'm really excited about all the dimensions of that. I think there's enormous opportunity in artificial intelligence and machine learning on what will be, terabytes and petabytes of data services that will be coming from space, whether it's synthetic aperture radar satellites or imaging satellites like Planet is doing. Someone needs to be on the back end and take all that data and provide meaningful services. All these business plans says, oh, the insurance companies can use it, or the government can use it, or this group can use it, but yet they haven't created the products associated with that or the right algorithms. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that type of environment. So those are just a couple of things that excite me right now.
Thank you so much for that.
Mike, we are almost out of time, but before we go, I just wanted to mention the Mike Miller Aerospace Engineering Innovation Award and just give you a minute, if you don't mind, to discuss why you created that award for aerospace engineering students.
Sure, it took a number of years to put it together and look at it, but I've always felt that having the basic aerospace engineering degree really was the backbone, was the core for me being able to do a lot of ventures going forward, and the success I've had. Even on the venture capital end or investment end, but in just the technologies. Not everything was an aerospace technology, but the fundamental technologies that I learned in aero, it keeps on being used. I've used it for 40 years, and I thought, in today's environment, I think a lot of students are interested in the entrepreneurial realm, and I thought, gee, an award for someone that might have ideas while they're in school, that can articulate it, put it down on paper, and not just an engineering idea, but to write something down that would say, look, at this could possibly be your business. Here's how much it would cost to develop. Here's how much. Here's who would buy it. What would be the pieces of it? Just led me to believe that why not? I think it'd be wonderful to help gestate some of those ideas out of Illinois, and maybe someday, just like Orbital was founded with a rich guy that put in a few $1,000s for our idea, might lead to something big. So that's why I funded it, and love to see a lot of students each year kind of compete for the best innovation idea that could lead to an entrepreneurial venture in aerospace.
So for those of you who are still on with us, those award submissions will open up in November. You will see emails coming from me about them, so keep an eye out for those and for all the criteria that are listed. If you'd like to know ahead of time, please send me an email and I can send you the criteria for that particular award, so you can be prepared when the submission deadline opens. So we've had one other question. One of the attendees here would like to know if Mike, Samantha, or Jenny, if you are willing to take questions from any of our attendees afterwards, if they could email you to follow up. So I will leave that up to you, and you can let me know privately if you want, and then I will share your email with anybody who asks, if that's okay. So with that, I think we are out of time. We're actually a little bit over time. So I just want to thank Mike, Jenny, and Samantha for being on with us today, for taking some time to speak with the students here. And thank you all, students, for hanging in with us for an hour. And I think that's our program for today. Oh, real quick, before we go, next week we will have another session of the Illini Aero Connections series, and that will be with Gary Weber, who will be speaking on social media and using it for career advancement. So I think this is something everybody, Aero or not, could probably tune in and listen to. So if you are available next Thursday at 4, please join us again.
Thanks, Courtney. Are you guys going to be putting these recorded sessions anywhere also if we wanted to watch them afterwards?
Yes, so I will leave that. Let's see, Deborah Larson is still on with us. So Deborah is our communications coordinator. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these will go on to the department's YouTube channel. So you can find them there.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck.